So now I'm honored to introduce Kurokawa, Masters of Architecture 2006, and Kate Spinelli, Masters of Interior Design in 2011, both who work at Ingenuity. Their presentation, Inclusive Design, Designing for, Designing with, will discuss many aspects of inclusive design, one of my favorites, and how it involves designing for and incorporating diverse experiences to expand our widest embrace of the human condition. This will be a 45-minute presentation, including questions, which will be saved until the end. So please give a warm welcome to I and Kate, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here on a Friday near evening. We're the closers of the event and so excited to be here today. So today we're going to be talking about inclusive design and just a little bit about us. Thank you for the intro, Janet, where you are. My name is Kurokawa. I promise my name does not mean artificial intelligence. It actually means love in Japanese. I'm an architect and principal with isgenuity in Boston, where I get to champion our higher education sector. But I come from about 20 years in healthcare and wellness projects, which I actually still support both on and off campuses. My pronouns that I use are she, her. I'm a very proud graduate of the BAC 2006 MARC program, where, oh, hi, Ian. Oh. Where you'll remember, I was 8 months pregnant defending my thesis. And I actually, when I was working on my final thesis book, I was having contractions and I eventually went to the hospital. My very best design is on the front cover of this presentation. She's 17 years old. And maybe at the networking event, you can ask me what she's going to be doing for college next year, because she's leaving me, but thanks, apple and tree.
Thank you all. My name is Kate Spinelli. I am a principal as well with at Ingenuity and Director of Interiors, also a proud BAC grad. As I was leaving, I was coming in. My pronouns are also she, her. As the Director of Interiors, I work across all three of our sectors: healthcare, higher ed, and science and technology, and lead a group of interiors. So, just a little bit about us to give some context. We're a 45-person firm. We have offices in Boston and Providence. We're in our third decade of work now as a firm. And while, like I said, as we're primarily known as healthcare, we also proudly work in higher ed and science and tech. We consider ourselves mission-driven, and we have the opportunity to work with top-ranked hospitals and bring that knowledge to safety net hospitals and organizations like Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, which is something that's deeply meaning for us and informs our work. So the next, we often get asked, what does isgenuity mean? So we'll just get that out of the way. Is genuine ingenuity. We pride ourselves on those words as our core descriptors. And like our founder and president likes to say, when you started the firm, he thought we'd be building buildings, designing buildings. And what he quickly came to realize is we're actually building community. And that community in turn is creating spaces that create culture. So when I look at this photo, actually, I thought, not just because we're here today, but what I see for me is the BAC community smiling back at us. We are obviously both proud BAC grads, but so is approximately 1/3 of our firm, either BAC educated or BAC educators or both. And I looked back at the stats. I've been with the firm for 18 years, my entire career since starting the BAC. So that's nearly 40 individuals across the decades that have come through our firm from BAC. And we think what makes that incredibly special, obviously, the BAC community is incredibly diverse, international community. And just a wealth of perspectives and experiences that have really informed who we have become as a firm.
So you touched upon it, Kate. So diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, it's really permeating through just about everything that we do at isgenuity in our workplace culture and in, hopefully you can hear it, in our workplace culture and everything that we do in the projects and clients that we try to serve and pursue, in how we build teams, both internally and externally with our consultants and our partners in the industry. So some numbers, you know, we're predominantly women throughout all levels of the firm and in leadership. And nearly half of us identify as racial or ethnic minority. And beyond those kind of traditional diversity terms, we have a group that has a wide range of identities and lived experiences that we support and celebrate. And really that fuels our creativity and our desire of working together and in supporting the work that we do, as Kate mentioned. It really creates a highly performing team environment. We place a lot of emphasis on recruitment, mentoring, hiring, promoting with DEI and B in mind. As I mentioned, when we create our teams, both internally and externally, we solicit our engineers and our consulting partners and even, you know, bang down the doors of our eventual construction partners, and we're squeaky wheels. We say, so what is your DEIB mission? Even if you're not an MBE or a WBE, what is your position and how are you trying to develop that pipeline? We're also involved in various industry organizations like the Professional Women in Construction, Alliance for Building Construction Diversity. We don't just sit there and participate in the events. We actually are part of the leadership and the boards, and we are allies and advocates for change.
I think just one last slide on culture and values, and this is to speak to sustainability because it's so near and dear to our heart. Sustainability is my great passion. That's something the BAC instilled in me, I think, in my first year, nearly 2 decades ago. And as an interior designer, I think my understanding of sustainability began with material health and toxicity, and this something I brought into our work and our practice as I grew through the firm and developed a team, this approach of do no harm through material health. And I think my understanding has greatly evolved over time as to what it means to be sustainable. We had the opportunity to go down to Grace Farms last week. If none of you have ever been, it's worth going down. But what that has really opened my eyes to is the idea of every material is made by somebody. Even if it's not toxic, it's made by human hands, and it's passing through lots of human hands. And it becomes hard to track which human hands that process went through. To the tune of something like 50 million people in forced labor across the globe, which is an explosion based on 10 years ago, not quite double, but nearly. So if things are being made with forced labor within the supply chain, that's obviously not sustainable.
So you can see just our lens on DEI and B goes into our approach and understanding and our research into sustainability. We heard a quote at one of the conferences that we actually chant as well, and it's up there. Sustainability without equity is sustaining inequity. So just give that a think as you specify products into your projects.
And apparently there's apps for that now too. Tracking supply chains, that's the next great challenge.
AI. So show of hands or sprained wrists. So in the profession, I'm assuming everyone's in the design, architecture, and adjacent professions in here. How many of you think that with the work that you do, that you are impacting people's lives? Now, how many of you believe that with the work that you do, that you're actually changing people's lives now and for future generations? I'm going to make believers up, all of you, after this presentation. That's the goal. You you know, as designers, as architects, as thinkers, we're taught to think iteratively, right? You know, we're always constantly juggling some of these questions in our minds, and that's part of our creative process. So the who, what, when, where, why, how, all of that are just bubbles in our head that we keep thinking throughout the design process. And inclusive design is really no different. So we hope you take away not just knowing today what inclusive design can be, but more of the panoramic understanding of it. And we'll talk through some case studies that touch upon the who, what, when, where, how, and why. And most importantly, we hope you take away the why, the big why, because we're all purpose-driven in here, right? Like, we're doing this work for people, for customer service, and for the environments that we create. And we hope it really strengthens your purpose and why. And some of the how will give you some takeaways.
Okay, so inclusive design. Oh, this is actually you.
Thank you. So just a little bit of backdrop on what inclusive design is. Everyone in here knows what ADA is, Americans with Disabilities Act, federal law, yes, okay. And, you know, accessibility and ADA address some very specific things, fundamentals of, you know, accommodating people who are challenged by disabilities in the mobility sense, audio and visual. Now, accessibility design is a fundamental that we should all be thinking about in whatever project that we're working on. Now, you've heard of universal design, right? So universal design is like a handshake or a head nod to accessibility design and saying, now, beyond ability, beyond disability, beyond age and size, how can we create an environment that more people universally can use and enjoy the qualities of the spaces that you create? Now, if universal design was a high five with a spray and wrist again, to accessible design, then inclusive design, you can go back one, thank you. No, other way. Yeah, there you go. Inclusive design is a big hug around them both and starts to talk more about the human condition, about all of the diversity, characteristics, identity, experiences, and expressions that we all hold. So this is a definition that the Council of Architecture and Built Environments in the UK has posted back in 2006. Now, if you could just entertain me while I read. No, let's go back again. Sorry. So defining inclusive design. So what is inclusive design? Well, it's inclusive, you know, so everybody can use the space, feel the qualities of space easily and with dignity. It's responsive. It takes into account of what people really need and how they want to use the space. And it's flexible so that you have a wide range of ways that you can experience the space. And it's convenient, so it's easily accessible for all. And it's accommodating for all people, age, gender, ability, mobility, ethnicity, and other life circumstances. Really wide definition. It's welcoming so that the barriers of exclusion are dismantled. And it's realistic because it offers choices and it recognizes that not all spaces have one solution. So inclusive, responsive, flexible, convenient, accommodating, welcoming, realistic. Add those in your vocabulary as you go through the iterative process of design. Now, next. So because I'm triggered here into making a thesis statement, let's consider this a thesis statement of inclusive design. It's designing for and designing with diversity and diverse experiences to expand our widest embrace of the human condition.
Okay, so inclusive design is to have an informed space that meets people where they are. The process has to be collaborative, right? And that's not just having a diverse team to give perspectives. We have to really amplify those voices. We have to encourage that participation, and then we have to actively listen. Now, I fully appreciate that it's 4:30 and it's a Friday night and you're all sitting here, and this PowerPoint is what's standing between you and the weekend, and the cocktails downstairs. So I promise we'll be brief. We're going to look at 3 case studies. We could talk for hours on each. I promise we won't. 3 very different case studies and use groups and challenges that all speak to the heart of what we're talking about. And hopefully you can leave with a few different examples of a way to approach your work that is more inclusive. So the first slide is, or the first case study rather, is Boston Children's Brookline. This is the Brain, Mind, and Behavior Center. And what makes this group so interesting to design for is the focus on neurodiversity. So what is neurodiversity? That is quite simply the statement that the human mind exists on a spectrum and we are diverse. So as a population, we are neurodiverse. And that is a fact, right? That is not a belief. It's not political. It's not an idea. It's not a concept. It's a biological fact. Things tend to operate on bell curves. And when things fall outside what is generally considered a societal norm, those individuals are considered neurodivergent. So this population clearly is predominantly identifying as neurodivergent. That might be autism, sensory processing, anxiety, the list goes on. But what's relevant to all of us is that the entire population is, of course, neurodiverse. So every space, maybe 1 in every 7 or 8 people is going to identify as neurodiverse, right? So these are things that we can consider for every single project moving forward. So all of this to say that the diversity of minds demands a diversity of spatial options. Go on to the next. So we picked out, again, in the hopes of being very brief and spending a minute or 2 on each slide, we picked out 2 different features that we thought were impactful on this project that we could speak to in a reasonable time frame. And the first is in the top left corner. It's really innocuous, tiny little image. I apologize for that. But this is about the evolution of the diagnostic board. In this type of project, we met, healthcare is amazing that way. They're so willing to be inclusive and meet with groups. We met with the autism family groups. We met with the patient and family advisory committees. We met with the providers themselves. And 2 main things came out of what are the greatest barriers to care? And what are the things that we're not dealing with? And one of them was the diagnostic board. Okay, so every exam room we've ever been in or seen has a diagnostic board. In this case, it's between the patient and the provider. We've got the provider, so their backs are closer to the door, so they can leave if possible, if they need to, without a patient or parent in between them, the door. But that diagnostic board would traditionally be, a beautiful bright color. We like to organize things, we're designers, and it would organize them neatly and we'd round the corners. But it still has, a half dozen pieces of equipment hanging off it that are endlessly interesting to kids, right? With cords and interesting shapes and buttons, and the kids just pull on them, right? And this becomes the major barrier to getting treatment and care. So what did we do? We tried, in the next iteration, let's put them in a cabinet. Maybe we can round the corners, but it still becomes a safety risk. Kids are still bonking their heads in the corners. It's awkward to get those doors open. So in this case, we said, you know what? We're going to position this. We're just going to actually bump the whole wall out. We're going to recess this as much as possible, and we're going to make it as boring as possible. So as designers, we know sometimes the simplest things to design actually take the most time or the most difficult to pull off. So if you don't notice it, that's the goal. And I can't take credit for this, but it's actually designed with boat hardware. So it's a sliding door. It's more durable than your average sliding hardware. And this for them was a huge win. The providers love it. The second thing is what we're calling sensory nooks and graphics. So again, we talked about this idea of this neurodiverse population. There's no one size fits all. So what do? There are kids who are going to walk into a space and be completely overwhelmed by textures and colors and lights and art and sheen. And then you have kids who are sensory seeking who are going to not function in a space that is really serene and bland. So what do? Well, we have to intentionally meet in the middle. We went through countless iterations with these graphics. We talked with parents and families about the line weights of the graphics, the spacing, the color contrast, right? Should it be pastels? Should it be all blues? Should they be highly saturated? And the answer was like, well, none of those, right? We have to find a way to meet in the middle and create a space that is both dynamic and interesting, has things that draw the eye up, like color changing LEDs in the ceiling and artwork, but also create safe spaces to retreat. And that's where these nooks were born out of. On the main lobby, you can see we use them for extra seating. And when we moved up into the playrooms in the waiting areas, we intentionally had those drawn down to the floor. They're open to the floor. And that was something that came out of a meeting with the parents and faculty groups, so that the idea that a child in a wheelchair or someone who's not fully mobile could safely play in these nooks as well. I think that's all we'll say about that and go on to the next. Thank you. So this is a very different type of healthcare project. This is adult, we're inpatient now, behavioral health. This is a Boston Medical Center project in Brockton. And just for a tiny bit of context, as of the summer of 2022, Brockton was experiencing the third highest spike in the state of Massachusetts regarding people waiting in EDs for inpatient behavioral beds. So this has 82 beds. It's 60,000 square feet. It is net zero energy ready, which is one of the really cool things about it that we're not going to talk about today. But the idea with this project is that it's serving a real need, right? And when we approach this, the design was staff-led, and that becomes really important because shout out to all the healthcare workers, right? They're on the front line. They have to live in this space every day. Their jobs are hard and it's dangerous. And, you know, when we typically approach behavioral health, you don't see spaces like this, right? This is open. The idea is, what if we treated this like hospitality and we treated people with dignity and we said, you deserve to be in a beautiful space, and we recognize that's essential to healing? What would that look like? How would we do it, right? Is that really a plexiglass screen saying you're dangerous and I don't feel safe with you, and I'm the person that's supposed to be here to help you? Of course it doesn't, right? So what we did was create this idea that what if we made it tall enough that it felt something like almost like a hotel lobby, right? And it has these undulating curves and it almost like welcomes you like a hug, right? And it says, hi, I'm here to help you. But what you don't see is that it's really deep, right? And it's just high enough. And it is fully enclosed on the sides. That if I decided to try to penetrate that barrier, I probably could, but it might be awkward and it's going to take me a few seconds. And there are safe spaces behind me for the provider that they can quickly escape. So that was just a few of like the design moves and intentions that speak to the idea that everyone deserves dignity. It's essential to who we are, and the quality of the spaces say a lot about how we feel about ourselves and how we behave. And next slide, just a few more brief points on this. I think one of the coolest things about this project that I couldn't believe we actually got the client to agree to, they were fully on board, so props to Boston Medical Center, was the idea that biophilia is healing and so important when we talk about dignity and well-being. And what they worked with us to do was to build these greenhouses all along the main corridors so that they're custom. Some of them, like the one you see in this image, has a bench on one side. This idea, we're bringing in these undulating shapes. We're trying to create community spaces in the corridors, but we're also letting natural light in, and we're letting people on both sides of those spaces enjoy the greenery. So some of them exist as full height to let in more light through some of the big main corridors. And I think it's one of the neatest, most unique aspects of the project. And they did take a risk with us in letting us design these custom greenhouses. What you can't see are tiny little holes in the plexiglass. We paid particular attention to the diameter and the spacing and made sure they didn't pose a anti-ligature risk as best as we could. But that was something that we thought was the most powerful aspect of the project. And I'll turn it over to I.
And the final project that we'll talk through is a gender inclusive restroom project that we're about to start construction on for a local major university. It's undisclosed. This is a really special project. We sought this project as not just a bathroom renovation, and we said it at the interview, we said it at meetings, and we said it just recently while we were interviewing the construction bidders. That anyone can design and build a bathroom. But this is a place for inclusivity. This is dismantling the notions of the gender binary and creating space where everyone is welcome. Now, that has led the process through and through. We designed this when the state, actually, the plumbing code, did not recognize gender inclusivity. Toilets are either male or female. Now, when we try to create places of belonging and you don't see yourself represented, just imagine just how that feels. We got to work with the community, the LGBTQIA community, in soliciting ideas and responses to how our design should be able to respond and accommodate. And the design, if you go into the next, design is such that this is a restroom that has 8 private compartments. They're all fully enclosed and fully private. There are different sizes. So one is ambulatory accessible and 2 of them are ADA accessible. So it's now addressing more than just about gender inclusion. It's about physical barriers and dismantling that and creating space that anyone and everyone of various abilities can utilize. The restrooms, I'll say the bathrooms, they surround themselves around a common communal sink that is not just a sink. It is a piece of art and a piece of sculpture. We're not even just patting ourselves on the back, but there's real careful attention to this because we want you to know that you're in a special place where you are celebrated. It's a social gathering kind of place, even for the basic physical function of just having to use the bathroom. But it promotes a balance of public and openness, but also respects privacy. And privacy is a real important aspect of designing for gender inclusion, where you have a population who might not feel safe and secure if you see those little crevices in those little cubicle compartments, or you see a little space down below or up high, acoustical privacy as well. So we're honoring all that in our planning. The open circulation offers visibility and no dead ends, so no one feels trapped or can get trapped. There's actually a duty station, I'll call it, with the ability to call for help if needed. And what you don't see in this photo here is there's a little nook off to the side that is for self-care. And this station offers menstrual products and sexual health products displayed, but artistically so. I mean, we're architects, right? But, you know, the language that we use is so important. Like when I say menstrual care, you've heard it before, feminine hygiene, right? Feminine hygiene. It also, it makes it like we're not hygienic, right? So using language in a population, in meetings with clients, with consultants, that just take a stance that we're designing respectfully for everybody to be able to use is really important. And I didn't note, you know, gender inclusivity and gender inclusive restrooms are different from gender neutral, right? And again, language matters. Gender neutral bathrooms, they kind of can, you know, they don't take a stance. You could stick a sign up on the wall that says, you know, gender neutral, and anyone can use it. But to create a space where multiple people can use it and everybody's included, this is going to be a really special project. Do you want to talk a little bit about just the look and feel?
Sure, just briefly touching on design, I think, we wanted to create something that really spoke to all of the thought that went into this, and it's not just a door off a hallway, a bathroom off a hall. We wanted to create a communal space, right? So how do you do that? It needed to have sort of an anteroom, and it happens to be in a hallway on the way to lecture classes, but that's okay. Happened to be a firewall. We wanted a blue glass wall. That's okay. The whole idea about creating community and this idea of compression and then the light that you come into became really central to the project, and we hope speaks to the level of importance of the project.
Yeah, this institution actually, this is this campus's first gender inclusive restroom. And as they are planning for future renovations in their aging facilities and updating their restrooms, they actually are not just settling now for just a cosmetic refresh on, their bathrooms. They're actually saying, you know what, we need to create this for inclusivity for our students and for the community that we serve. So they're listening to their community, and they're bringing that as an important priority for the designers and people who serve them. Okay. So you heard about kind of the what is and all the kind of bubble questions that we talked about. You saw through 3 project examples of how we have exercised parts of that inclusive design process. And we'll recognize that, architecture and design is not really just about the process of creating and, beautiful drawings and renderings and all that stuff. It's an execution, and it's the built form. So there's a lot of respect that goes into our partners in the construction industry who will execute the vision that we have as designers and bring it to fruition. So how, with thinking that this is a 2-pronged process, it's process as well as execution, how can we expand this approach so that we can even make this even more of an inclusive process from design into construction? Next. So we'll go through 4 slides very quickly. First one, let's get uncomfortable, right? We're talking about some stressful things in our design projects here and how we respond to that. And it's because the world is a complicated place, right? Like, I don't need to tell you, you scroll through your phones and you watch the news or whatever, there's something bad that's always happening, right? There are societal stresses that are on the rise. Kate mentioned a lot of them. Inequity in access to education, to housing, to food security, to healthcare and wellness. And all amongst us living in an environmental crisis. I'm sure some of you listened to the lecture that happened earlier virtually and saw some images in the transportation infrastructure, the resiliency one. Yeah. And what, snow in April? No. Next. Let's stay uncomfortable because while the world is a complicated place, people are also complicated. We're not as simple as it seems. It's not just us on the surface. Kate talked about the neurodiversity. I just talked about the gender inclusivity and being visible in terms of belonging and placemaking. Growing mental health crisis. There's a growing mental health crisis problem. And also, elderly and the aging population is only getting older, and they're living longer. And they're more diverse than they were before. So when we take into account of all these complexities of the world and of people, we need to think dynamically about the intersectionality of place and of people. And we need to respond in a way that includes as much of those factors as possible. Third point. Look at the NCARB statistics, look at AIA. We're still not there yet in terms of diversity and inclusion goals. It's changing, it's evolving, and that's really excited. You know, look at the leadership in the AIA, amazing. Now, we need to think about how we diversify the pipeline. So is it mentorship programs? Is it how you solicit to, you know, your future employees? Is it about thinking about the partners that you onboard onto your RFP teams, right? Beyond the requirements of what RFPs might ask for the percentages, beyond those percentages, are you being the squeaky wheel for change and asking of your team partners, well, what's your stance in DEI and B? And last takeaway is collaborate. You know, as architects and designers, you know, we're in a position where we get to work with other people and other professionals and trades and construction partners and owners. We're kind of in the middle of it, right? So again, be the squeaky wheel, set the mission and vision for inclusivity for the whole entire team. Like on that gender inclusive project, make it the stance that it's not just your bricks and mortar, it's about change. It's about cultivating change. So you heard of some of our projects and some of those bubbles of the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and hopefully we've addressed some of that through the case study projects, and you are now equipped with some tips on how to cultivate that change. And it's really important because as designers and as architects, your job is to listen and take in the requests, the requirements, the mission, the goals of your people, of your community, and interpret that with your own diverse and intersectionally rich lenses, and to shape that into a space and place. So your fingerprints are involved in that shaping and in that environment. And in order to create a more responsive place, in order to create a more diverse placemaking process and product, it behooves us to become more diverse, to become more equipped, to become more sensitive to the uncomfortable things and to understand how to respond to them. So we want to thank you for your listening ears, and we'd love to hear of any questions.
A couple questions. Yeah, no, it's not just me. I'm not the one asking the questions. They know this is sort of my jam. So like they were talking everything and you did a fabulous job. I was a little worried about you going in, you know that. And like it's my jam, you know, like all the inclusivity and the biophilia and asking the hard questions, such an important part. The gender neutral bathroom and gender inclusive bathroom was a touch of genius. I tend to teach it in my trauma informed design class now. I teach biophilia. So again, they did a bang up job. With that, we've got a couple of questions and we'll open it up to the floor. First question was, is the sink accessible for wheelchair use? I'm assuming yes.
Yes. How many hours and hours and days did we spend on shaping this specific desk. And on top of that, thank you for the question. Yes, that has to be a rule within the space because there's no separate
Right.
accessible sink in the space. So we actually didn't go into the details about the sink itself, but this is a custom piece.
Yeah.
It is artfully done and it is sustainably.
That's the big struggle, right?
Yep.
But without plastics, how do you create these curvilinear forms and make them accessible without using plastic? So that was our goal, the goal we set for ourselves.
So this will be built with GFRG, with glass fiber reinforced
Just double.
gypsum. I was quizzed.
I was impressed.
With a porcelain slab, and undermounted, porcelain sets.
Okay, and one other question, I thought it was actually a really good question, so I don't know who asked this, my apologies. But the reception of this project about the bathroom, how was it accepted or what was the feedback that you got from students and staff? And I was gonna add parents, because I would think that the parents would be like, wait, what are you doing with my kids, right? Right. My parents had some of that similar kind of thought process, even just for me going to college, so.
So just to place it in context, this is for a higher education facility. The folks who were participating on the gender equity board were postgrads, PhD students, older folks. I'm just imagining like the kids.
Why you're looking at me, you're saying all
Right,
the folks.
Well, oh no, because you mentioned parents, so their parents and caregivers were not on board. So yeah, the responses were, it was funny, we had shown various options of layouts. And the actual layout of the toilet rooms were shown in different configurations. And we talked about, you know, the degree of openness and the need for privacy, full height partitions, and the need for feeling that, you know, there weren't any dead end barriers. That was talked about a lot. We talked through some of the more of the look and feel as well of just the reflectivity that is inherent in space and the surfaces that we are creating. If you noticed, each of the bathroom doors, they're back painted glass. They're each uniquely colored, offering an array, and the tiles that we chose have an iridescent pattern to it so that it reflects a broad range of colors once it hits the light. You know, so just think about that as a partie, if you will, of, I know I'm in architecture school, sorry, it comes out. So, you know, you think about that in terms of the human condition, and how varied and beautiful, you know, people can be. So that was talked about as well.
Okay, great. Is there any questions here in the hall? Anybody got a question? Judy?
I just have a comment. I considered touring this building when I was ordered about a year or two ago, and it's stunning. I mean, there are so many pieces that I would love to have seen in the, you know, like the trees with the buds and the butterflies, and so many things that are beautiful in there that I can just imagine being there with a kid that had an issue, that had something interesting to look at or do by just standing. And it just struck me that it was beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Anybody else? All right, awesome.
Figuring it
Okay, congratulations. Truly impressive. Thank you. And Kate for this incredible presentation. I just loved it. So as the BAC talks draw to a close, I wanted to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for being a part of this incredible event. Thank you to all of our esteemed guests for your attendance and active participation, and to our speakers for providing an incredible avenue of growth and learning. Everyone here today has enriched our discussions and contributed to the success of the BAC talks. As we depart today, let's carry with us the insights, connections, and inspiration gained from the BAC talks. Let us continue to build upon bonds forged today and work together to shape the future of architecture and design. Once again, thank you for your participation and support and for all that you do to enrich the BAC community. And before I pass it on to Dr. Mahesh Das, the Grand Fromage here at the BAC, otherwise known as the president, I just want to thank the advancement crew and for all the hard work that you've done to also help the Alumni Advisory Council pull this off today. I know that this was a very big undertaking for you guys, and it's been a very long day. So without any further ado, Dr. Mahesh Das.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here and online. Wasn't that a very stimulating and gratifying day? Yeah, it started early in the morning, 8 o'clock, and we have had a very robust day of wonderful presentations. And every presentation just demonstrated the excellence that our alumni and our friends and partners have been really evidencing out in practice and in academia. And so it was just, it's wonderful to see all of that. And it does not come together just by itself. So I'd like to thank our Alumni Advisory Council first. If you don't mind, please stand and be recognized for all of those in AAC. And those who are actually online as well. Right. So, and I have been alternating between in-person and online to make sure I'm covering the ground, also seeing how the experience is, which now goes to say that our advancement crew have done enormous job in conceptualizing it, really working with the AAC and making sure it is organized into an extraordinary experience. So thank you. Thank you. Michelle. And I'd like to point out Peter in particular. The reason that Peter is our faculty. I'll tell you why I've singled him out. If you look around the room here, and those online, you might be able to actually, yeah, you can see online too. There are 12 computers and 3 cameras, maybe even 4. And all of this is what it has taken to create a very robust, enjoyable experience, whether you are in person or online. And both have been very good. Yeah, please. Thank you. It's wonderfully collaborative work. Right. So, and of course, it goes without saying, thank you to all the presenters who have taken time in, first of all, agreeing to putting together the work and then coming and presenting here or online. I think we are very grateful for your contributions and we celebrate your extraordinary work and continue to cheer for you and celebrate it as we move forward as well. Thank you. Yeah, and of course, the facilities who have done a lot of work in pulling this together. And who else am I missing? I think we covered the ground, haven't we? Okay, very good. And the trustees who have joined us here, particularly, thank you for being here for us and then enjoying the time together here as well. So I will wrap up by saying that this is an event that is a very special kind, because it's not often that we can bring together our alumni and faculty and students also together in order to showcase their work and reassert the connection we have with them, the institution, the alma mater, to our alumni, and the accomplishments that they have been undertaking. So this is the third time we are doing it. And now I think we know how to do it in the post-pandemic context, because they started in the pandemic time, during the pandemic time, and it was, great iteration. But this is truly the first time that we are doing it as a hybrid, which seems to fit so perfectly for the needs of the community here in person, in Boston, or anywhere around the world. And I have been seeing the attendees, and they are all over the world. So it is great success. I think we can all be proud of this. And now we go into the keynote, which is a cashier lectureship in the humanities in a short while after the reception. So thank you again. And let's now go into the reception together, and much anticipated lecture by Janet Eckelman to come up soon. Thank you.